to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Judith Leblanc. She is the director of the Native Organizers Alliance. She's a member of the Caddo tribe in Oklahoma, and the Native Organizers Alliance does a lot of things, but its mission is to serve as a national Native training and organizing network. At the core of her work is the belief that organizing a grassroots, durable network of Native leaders and organizers who share a common theory of change rooted in traditional values and sacred practices is the critical foundation to achieving tribal sovereignty and racial equity for all. Her work is grounded in the tribal belief that being, quote, a good relative is rooted in total awareness of the environment, past and future, and acting in harmony with all of the natural world and humanity in the present. Judith, I will put myself on mute and hand it over to you now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. I am so glad to be here. Water is life. Minnie Wachoni. Water is life. I just am so glad that you all are gathered today in the Valuing Water Minicon in this moment of water crisis, of climate chaos. Gatherings such as these are so necessary to raise concerns, to raise consciousness, and to actually study what is working. How can we change our relationship to water and the natural world? To be in good relationship with water, to be aware of how our actions affect water and the future. In this stage of history, water must be protected. Water must be seen as a basic human right. Access to water, a basic human right. Since the beginning of time, of course, water has been a part of life. The crisis problems that we're facing with water right now are because water has become a commodity, bought, sold, or controlled by a few without consideration on the impact of culture or land or wildlife. Government policies are needed that actually should be shaped. I would advocate that government policies should be shaped by an Indigenous framework, because fundamentally, an Indigenous framework means being in good relationship with the natural world. You know, in Western scientific studies, people learn about nature. From an Indigenous point of view, we learn from nature because we are part of the natural world. We are in relationship with the natural world. And from an Indigenous perspective, the past and the future come together in the present, so that how we walk in the present, what lessons we learn from the past, shapes how we walk in the present. Our hopes, our dreams, our hopes for our descendants are present, in the present. So how we walk, what we do, has a major, huge impact. It's a way of seeing self in relationship to the time continuum. How we protect, how we utilize, how we guarantee access to clean water for our descendants is really a complicated question. But understanding that water is life, understanding that water cannot be replaced. Everything we need to live is present on the earth, but there is a crisis. There is a crisis in the natural world. There's climate chaos. So we need to learn some lessons for how we can act in the present. Standing Rock. I don't know how many of you were there. I'm hoping many of you read about the amazing experience at Standing Rock Sioux Reservation back in 1970. Oh my God, I'm going back to Wounded Knee, 1973. No, no, no. Back in 2017, a prayer camp was established to prevent the Dakota Access Pipeline from being built. And when this prayer camp was established, it was done with the idea that not only were the people who came there, the over 10,000 people who came there to protect the water supply of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, they were also there to protect the 17 million, the water for 17 million people who live, work, and play along the shores of the Missouri River. And so you can see in that experience, people were standing for for all of humanity. It was an act of sovereignty. It was for the right of the tribe to decide what was best for their water supply and their land. But we are all in relationship. Their water, their land, directly related to 17 million people along the shores of the Missouri. Our concerns about the potential impact of the Dakota Access Pipeline have been confirmed repeatedly and just recently by a court decision. And the court ordered that the oil company should stop the flow of oil in order for a full environmental impact study to be done. Yet the Dakota Access Pipeline Company refuses to stop the oil. They refuse. Again, a decision for profit for a few versus the Standing Rock Sioux tribe's legal, inherent, and moral right to protect the Missouri River on behalf of 17 million. Of course, the struggle continues there in the the Standing Rock Sioux tribe is pursuing further legal action to try to stop the flow of oil, to be continued. But the truth is that although you may have heard about Standing Rock because we interrupted the narrative of who we are in the 20th century and in the 21st century, Native communities have been leading these kinds of struggle for water protection, for land protection, for the natural world since the beginning of time. Using an Indigenous framework, we understand our ancestral responsibilities. We have responsibilities that go back since the beginning of time. And even if you are an urban Indian, such as I am, I walk with a high heel on one foot and a moccasin on the other. Even if you grew up in a city, your ties to land, to place, to the natural world are part of your culture, a part of a way of thinking and of being. So in many, many ways, Native communities, tribal leaders who are on our sovereign land bases, and natives in the urban areas have a common understanding of what it's going to take to continue to interrupt the dominant narrative of the role and the rights and the responsibilities of Native peoples in protecting water in the natural world. For example, a water struggle that you may not have heard much about is one that the Native Organizers Alliance has been involved with. For the last 6 years, we've been working with the Yankton Sioux Tribe and a traditional women's society and the Tribes Treaty Council in order to restore the Missouri River bioregion. Following the Dakota Access Pipeline struggle, the tribe, the Traditional Women's Society, and the Treaty Council decided that they needed to take a stand on their 150-mile length of the Missouri River, which is downstream from the Standing Rock Sioux Tribes section. Treaties, and this is something that many do not understand, but treaties are legal documents that can only be changed by an act of Congress. In fact, even under a right-wing dominated Supreme Court, treaties have been upheld over and over again around land use, around water use, around taxation. Treaties were signed with tribes in exchange. There was an exchange. Land for the right to live and protect and nurture our territory, land in exchange for birth care from health care from birth to death, and education, and the right to live a decent life. That's what treaties are. They are in full effect. It is a constitutional right and repeatedly reaffirmed by the Supreme Court, yet not fulfilled. So the Yankton tribe, realizing their moral, inherent, and legal right to oversee and take care of the Missouri bioregion, began to work with NOA on a journey to create, really, it's a journey to create a model to restore those inherent and moral legal rights, to create a model that all of the Osheti-Shikoan tribes, all those tribes who live, the 9 tribes who live in the Missouri bioregion, can play their role to protect the river, the plants, the wildlife, the groundwater. You know, South Dakota is the place where the KXL pipeline was set to be built through the Osheti-Shikoan lands. Also, through the middle of the largest inland aquifer. So when the Standing Rock Sioux tribe took a stand, one of the Osheti-Shikoan tribes, it sent a shockwave through Indian country, and tribes began to realize we need to take our role, our place, play our role as sovereign nations. So for the last 6 years, we've been working with the tribe to upgrade their EPA uh, capacity because, of course, under the Trump administration, the funding had left the EPA of the tribe as only a half-time position, one person to oversee water quality, land, and so forth. We also have been working with the tribe to engage traditional leaders in re-establishing ceremonial relationship with the river and traditional practices for nurturing the wildlife, the plant life in the bioregion. And lastly, we've been working with the tribe to engage the grassroots in what is often called citizen science, water testing, to help the community understand that they each must play a role in protecting the water. So frankly, we are creating a model that is braiding science with spiritual and cultural values to be in good relationship. Science, culture, and spirituality have to be woven together. There are a lot of obstacles, of course, to this project. One is the lack of resources. Yet still, 1% of philanthropy in this country, less than 1% goes to Indian country. So there's a lack of government resources and a lack of private resources. Yet the Osheti-Shikoan tribal leaderships understood the urgency. And they decided, the Yankton tribe first, and now we're working with 3 other tribes, to pass water codes that were much more stringent than EPA codes, much more, and ways to enforce a water code. Treaties make state laws. State laws don't apply to treaty lands. Treaty law supersedes state law. But at the same time, we also were thinking long-term. What kind of system change do we need in order to ensure that tribal nations, the Yankton tribe, actually is part of the decision-making process about water quality, about how to restore traditional vegetation that was destroyed by agribusiness and their fertilizers and overdevelopment. And also, how do the tribes along the river have access to the river for economic tribal development? This is a 10-year project, and the goal is to change the relationship with the federal government by leveraging the political power and the legal standing of tribal governments. As we saw at Standing Rock, and our finding all across Turtle Island, as we call the United States, the federal government has ignored and denied our legal right to be caretakers of land and water. They've they've had, as a part of a statute, the need to consult tribes, but consultation has become weaponized. They send an email to a tribal leader and they check off the box, the tribe has been consulted. They hold public hearings when the decision has already been made, and people come and and bring their hopes, pour their hearts out about the impact of a given infrastructure project, like the KXL pipeline, for example, in South Dakota. For over a decade, this battle has gone on. And then they continue to make decisions behind the backs of the tribal nations. So it's been a very steep learning curve for the tribal leaders in these dire conditions to lean into acting sovereignty, you know, being sovereign, being assuming our right, which is legal, moral, and inherent, to be a part of the decision making. It's also been a steep learning curve to upgrade the scientific and technical capacity of the Yankton tribe. But we have a real determined core of leadership, both grassroots, traditional, and elected leadership, who believe this project is a long-term project that can actually change the relationship with the Bureau of Land Management, the Army Corps of Engineers, and overall with the Department of the Interior. And that for the first time, they will be able to, perhaps with these water codes and the enforcement of these water codes, lead not only for their tribal nations, but the entire region, to protect the farmers, to protect those who live off the land, the ranchers, to protect and develop new ways of utilizing the bounty of the Missouri River for everyone, not just their tribes. The truth is that policies on every level of government need to prioritize the health of the natural world, of water above profit. Policies on every level of the government must include an indigenous framework of understanding the lessons of the past, our ancestral knowledge, our collective ancestral knowledge, for the good of all of our descendants and relatives. I believe that we can begin to turn the water and climate crisis around, beginning now. I think gatherings like this are part of the process to educate ourselves about what works, to educate ourselves about the deeper meaning as to why we must all become water protectors, raising consciousness about our individual roles, our communities' roles, and, and actually guaranteeing that water will be clean and good for time immemorial, and an understanding that making access to clean water is a human right. You know, in 2020, we in Indian country understood, as others did, that the country was moving in a destructive direction. And Native Organizers Alliance, like other Native organizations, realized that we had to engage in the 2020 elections, nonpartisan engagement, in an unprecedented way. In a way, Native Organizers Alliance, we organized in 9 states to make it possible for the largest Native vote in history. In those 9 states, we were a swing vote. At the same time, our reservations were some of the most infectious places in this country. But we worked with 100 moccasins on the ground, tribal leaders, native, traditional Native leadership, and grassroots community organizations to make history, to organize and mobilize the largest Native vote ever. So, for example, all across Indian country. We risked our lives to do so. The Navajo Reservation, one of the most infectious hard hit areas in the country, our moccasins on the ground organized a voter turnout that was 80% turnout. People turning out from their homes where they had no running water and had to be trucking water to their homes, and in the most infectious area in the state of Arizona, and experiencing 3 to 4 day lockdowns. What we did on the ground was miraculous. An 80% voter turnout on the Navajo Nation. In Wisconsin, on the Menominee Reservation, there was a 23% increase in voter turnout in Menominee County. 23% voter increase. That county was the most infectious county in Wisconsin. That county is the Menominee Reservation. In 2020, Native grassroots political power interrupted the narrative of who we are in the 21st century. Yet we didn't stop there. And relatives, we are so proud that we may have set into motion something that will change the direction of government policies for generations. We couldn't stop there, just mobilizing the largest Native vote in history. We knew it was time, and many of us began to speak about it in November. We needed the first Native to lead the Department of the Interior. The Department of the Interior, who manages and oversees land and water management, who oversees public lands, who in fact oversees tribal governance in every area of life of Indian people: education, healthcare, housing, monies for infrastructure. So Native Organized Alliance with other Native organizations began to build grassroots mass pressure on the transition team for Deb Haaland to become the Secretary of the Department of the Interior. We had a very strong commitment from the Biden-Harris team right from the beginning. Both candidates, Biden and Harris, participated in the first ever Native Presidential Forum, which NOA, Native Organizers Alliance, organized with Four Directions. The first ever Native Presidential Candidates Forum. We had all the top tier candidates there. Trump didn't respond. But the truth is, they only responded because we did the math for them. 7 states, 77 electoral votes. Native vote, a swing vote in those states. So they participated, and both Harris and Biden made strong commitments to Indian country and put out programs for how they would address tribal consultations, how they would address infrastructure, healthcare, education. The first thing that the Biden-Harris administration did, the first day they were in office, they stopped the KXL pipeline. After over a decade of organizing a movement that was global, that participated in legal struggles. The tribes had the only legal standing to continue to battle in the courts through grassroots pressure with prayer camps and forums and petitions and testifying at hearings. And in the first day of the administration, they stopped the KXL pipeline. So we knew we had a strong commitment from them. But the truth is that it was not an easy lift for people to consider that an Indian woman could lead this department. This department is considered the playground of the oil, gas and oil companies, of fossil fuel. It's their representative in the cabinet. So we mobilized over 50,000 letters to the transition team from those 9 states where we worked. Over 300 tribes out of over 500 tribes sent letters calling for them to name Deb Haaland as the next secretary because she was the most qualified, had worked for tribes, had worked in business, had helped to pass and initiated more bipartisan pieces of legislation than any other person in Congress. She was the most qualified. Well, this week, they confirmed Deb Haaland. And in Indian country, we celebrated. We had a watch party of the vote and the debate and a celebration where Deb Haaland paid us a visit with her sisters. 19,000 people viewed that watch party and celebration. 19,000. Yes, we had a good day on Monday. But we understand what we're up against in the long haul. One person cannot make this change. There were only 2 Republicans who voted for her in the Senate. The rest of the Republicans didn't vote. Majority of the Republicans did not vote on this nomination. When she went before the committee, the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, for her confirmation hearing, we sent over 40,000 letters to the Senate supporting her. Grassroots letters. 36,000 letters were sent to Republicans who had not announced their position in order to persuade them. We have the opportunity under this new administration to protect water and land from fossil fuel corporations. But there will be many obstacles. But I urge you to think about what we are doing in Indian country to engage in these policy shifts. Yes, Deb Haaland is the Secretary of the Treasury. Oh my goodness, I gave her a promotion. The Secretary of the Department of Interior. She is the first Native woman to do so. She knows how we live. She understands tribal sovereignty. She knows what real consultation is. She understands that we need to be a part of the solutions for the good of all. She also has lived our lives, being homeless, living on food stamps as a single mother. She is someone who has strong Indigenous values. But the truth is, without allies, without strong allies who understand the nature of the system change that's necessary to make access to clean water a human right, to ensure that our descendants have water, good water, clean water, life-giving water, we have to do it together. The biggest lesson from the KXL pipeline struggle, which went on for over 10 years, some kids, families that I have worked with for the last 6 years on the KXL pipeline have only grown up protesting the pipeline, feeling the urgency and the anxiety of their parents and their grandparents about the potential building of the pipeline. We have seen many, many people walk on who worked on trying to protect the largest inland aquifer. But we didn't do it alone. It was Native-led and initiated. But quickly, we built strong bonds with farmers and ranchers and all those who drink water. All those who drink water, they were our target audience. They were the ones that we would aim our testimony at hearings, the banners that we'd carry in demonstrations, or the prayers that we made to protect Mini-Wachoni. And so I learned some big lessons because I began to understand that indigeneity is really not about being Indian. It's about understanding your relationship to land, to water, to understanding history, and that indigeneity is a guide for government policies that will protect the natural world, and that we all must strive for that relationship to land and water and an understanding of it and an understanding of history. I am very humbled sometimes when I'm working in South Dakota. COVID has interrupted our project on the water codes, but I am very humbled by my experience there, especially as an urban Indian. I'm a member, a citizen of the Caddo Nation of Oklahoma. I have spent many decades in Harlem, New York, but I've been very humbled there because I understand that we have power that sometimes we don't recognize, and that we have power to bring people together. That's our medicine. Bringing the farmers and the ranchers together, the environmentalists, those who like to hunt and fish. We brought those people together for over 10 years. And that public pressure culminated with an executive order stopping the pipeline. Organizing at the grassroots, but understanding that we have a common stake for our collective, life of our descendants is really the way we must live in this moment of history. So I really appreciate being a part of this gathering, this important gathering, and I hope that I've made a contribution to how you all will each think about the work that you do to protect water.
Thank you, Judith, for keeping us informed about all of the different work that's going on across the country in terms of water protection in Indian country and outside, and how political organizing is a huge part of that work. Um, I want to open it up to questions and answers at this point. And in the webinar format, we are going to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen toolbar. And I will moderate this. So Judith, I'll give you the questions in terms of your response. So audience members, we're about 60 strong. Feel free to keep those questions rolling in. We've got plenty of time for that. And I'll start off with the first one, Judith. This is from Laura Rodriguez. Excellent question. Wondering if you and the Native Organizers Alliance are involved in any way in formulating legal rights of nature, where the inherent rights of ecosystems, species, and waterways are recognized, honored, and protected.
Yes, this is a very important development which has international roots. One of our leaders of our network is participating in one of the national committees that have brought together academics and scientists and well-known figures like, you know, movie stars and other political figures. And they have invited 5 Indian representatives, and one of our leaders from the Menominee Reservation is sitting on that committee. We think it's a very important initiative because it brings home the fact that indigeneity, an indigenous approach, should be legalized. It should be a part of the statutes. It's similar to prior informed consent. The UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People had put forward the legal concept of prior informed consent as being the basis for government to government relationships. I am a dual citizen. I'm a citizen of the Caddo Nation and a US citizen. And our nations are nations within this nation. And so international solutions are a very important part for us to move forward, like the idea of the natural world having legal rights. And with prior informed consent, we're just leaning into the fact that we do have the right to be part of the decisions that are made about land and water.
All right, thank you. Um, Caitlin Redelman asks, what are your hopes for the future of the Department of the Interior under Secretary Holland's leadership and beyond?
Oh my goodness. I don't think people perhaps understand that Deb Haaland and Sharice Davids were the first 2 Indian women to be elected to Congress in 2018. Hundreds of years, and there had never been a Native woman in Congress. We've never had our Barbara Lee. our Maxine Waters, for our children to learn about our right and role in governing for the good of all. Our children have never had that. And now the understanding that we will have the first Native woman heading up the Department of the Interior, which plays such a central role in the lives of Indian people. The hopes are very high amongst all of us, but the truth is, we are very realistic about the system and the fact that after hundreds of years of systemic racism, a system built on colonialism and slavery, we don't have any illusions. And we understand that the fossil fuel extractive industries are very powerful. In the committee, the Senate Committee of Energy and Natural Resources alone, $8 million of campaign contributions went into that committee. So, we know who we're up against. But we also believe that there is a path where popular opinion, the majority, want action on climate change. They want action. Majority of the people in this country think that hunting and fishing are important for our lifestyles. And so I think the protection of public lands, I think there's a lot of popular support for, and they've been totally underfunded, have been slashed to the bone in the last 4 years. And so I think that Native nations will be able to play a role in helping to lead the way on how to repair and restore public lands. But I also think we are going to see, and this is the most important change, tribal nations being viewed as equals to the US government, and that in negotiations around sacred sites, for example, that tribal nations will be sitting at the table to decide with the government, not having a veto power, but decide with the government how our sacred sites should be protected. Because it's a constitutional right, the right to religion, freedom to religion. So those are some of my hopes that we will achieve a rightful nation to nation status with the federal government.
All right, thanks, Judith. We've got a question from Jim Finch, who actually served on a panel earlier today as an EPA attorney who specializes in the Clean Water Act. Jim asks, should we have confidence that Keystone XL is permanently derailed, or do we need to continue to be vigilant about its future?
Well, ancestral wisdom teaching us that it's never done. It's just never done. I mean, when I think about the amount of money that has been spent for decades, just for a decade, just for the KXL pipeline, it is outrageous. And thankfully, we had lawyers from the Native American Rights Fund, but we still, had to put a lot of resources into that. And when an executive order stops a pipeline, it could be reversed under the next president. So we know that we have to be vigilant. And one of the ways that we're being vigilant on the ground is that the organizers on the ground are now working on plans to ensure that every right of way is vacated in court, because we know they could hold on to the right of ways that they bought or were awarded by the state. They could hold on to them for years and then wait for the next administration, which uh, could be favorable towards building a pipeline. But I have to tell you something. 3 days after Biden wrote that executive order and issued it, the KXL pipeline company, TransCanada, approached a tribal entity called the Oceti Power Authority, which has been working for the last 4 or 5 years on establishing a wind power generating so that the tribes could produce for the region wind power electricity. But the problem has been resources, getting investors. So TransCanada called them, said, oh, now we're thinking of building solar. So they want to use that right away. They want to make profit. They know the future of oil is on the downswing, like coal. And so they had the audacity to approach the Oceti-Chacon Power Authority about investing and therefore trying to control uh, 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 an independent sovereign initiative by the Oceti-Chacon uh, nations. So I say we have to be vigilant.
Alexandra Fenimore asks, what is or was the most challenging part of working on this cause? I assume that this person is referencing the pipeline work. And how can we as individuals and as a group overcome these challenges?
There are two angles. The first is, and this again is from an Indigenous framework of understanding, that we need to be spending 60% of our attention looking to the horizon. What is the future? Where do we want to be in the future, in the distant future, in the near future? And 40% of our time should be spent on responding to those things that get in our way, to getting to that horizon. In the KXL fight, we were always so on the defensive and fending off new attacks and new maneuvers to try to steal land from farmers, which they did, trying to violate different kinds of state codes, which they did, um, and the fear and intimidation. I mean, they right after Standing Rock, they went into a full throttle narrative about how those crazy Indians were going to stop blocking roads and taking over people's land, and really stirred up such a mess that the right-wing controlled state legislature passed a bill criminalizing protests at pipelines in direct collusion, public collusion with the governor, Governor Newsom. So that was a huge challenge, that we were fending off and not looking towards the horizon enough to what it is that we want rather than simply what we're against. The second challenge, resources. In order to have a meeting statewide of all the leaders, tribal leaders, grassroots leaders, farmers and ranchers, it would cost $5,000 for gas, food, and a place to stay overnight. South Dakota is a big state, so resources were always like at the heart of some of the difficulties. And I think advocacy, if any of you are related to philanthropy, we need to increase the amount of money that is given to initiatives by tribes and Native community groups, because less than 1% of all philanthropy goes to Indian country when we have the greatest need and responsibilities for taking care of water and land.
Less than 1%. Wow. Um, Elizabeth Grace Huddleston asks, how has the land back movement affected the creation of alternative land ownership and land sharing practices? She wonders if it's begun to benefit water rights and water access.
Well, not yet. You know, Land Back, I'm actually the chair of the board of the organization that developed that slogan. It's the NDN Collective. The executive director is the grandson of people that I worked with many years ago at Wounded Knee in 1973 during the occupation of Wounded Knee. So now I'm working with the grandson, and the NDN Collective has advanced this campaign slogan, but it's very much like defund the police. It's a framework to understand that there is land that should be co-managed. There is land that should be just straight up given back to tribes because it's public land, and then be supported with resources to manage land and water and sustainable regenerative economic development. I do think the land back movement, or this idea, will, in the long run, support better management and protection of water. And I think one of the things that I know the original, kind of the original idea of building a land back movement is that most people in this country do not know anything about Indians past the early 1900s, at the end of the treaty making uh, period in federal government history. Because a majority of states, I think there are only 11 states that have state mandates to teach American Indian history from the past to the present. There's only 11 states. And many of those states don't resource it. It's mandated, but not resourced. And so most people in the country, not most, that's an overstatement. We did a survey called Reclaim Native Truth. It's a couple of years ago. We interviewed 20,000 people of all races, and 39% of people thought we were all dead. 39%. The people who lived near big landowning reservations had the sharpest and most dramatic racist stereotypes of Indians. So systemic racism is such that that it plays out differently in different places. And I think the fear that people have of their land being taken is one of those things that we're trying to help educate people that, in fact, land back is a really important and good thing for everyone, because it means better management, traditional management, a connection to land and history, and restoring balance in the natural world.
All right, I just posted in the chat the resource that Judith mentioned, the Reclaim Native Truth, if you're interested, a body of research and recommendations to make movement on this area. Nicholas Money asks, let me pull it back up here. Part of the problem lies in this wider lack of understanding of what we've lost. If more people were aware that the Ohio River and the other great river systems of North America teemed with fish, big fish, before we polluted the water through deforestation and industrial pollution, built dams and so on, I wonder if we would place a greater value on restoration projects. So perhaps, Judith, you could speak to um, any kind of initiatives within Indian country and perhaps beyond that NOA or its partners are working on to do this type of education, following up from your last answer?
Well, we are actually doing a project starting in May called the Red Road to DC, a totem journey. Up in Washington State, there's been an over decade long struggle around protecting the salmon in the Columbia Basin. And we are working with tribes that are part of a coalition of environmentalists, wilderness, and native tribes trying to um, uh, undo the damage that 4 dams have done on the Snake River. And it has brought 2 species of salmon to near extinction. And this struggle has been going on for over a decade. What has convinced many people to support this struggle is, of course, salmon. They may not understand the relationship that the peoples of the land in Washington, Oregon have to salmon, but they are fish tribes and their origin stories are intertwined. But the truth is that they built 4 dams that stilled the rivers and blocked fish from going up and downstream. And it created, therefore, the basis for um, the near extinction of these salmon. But it also is disturbing the ecosystem, because when the fish go to the ocean, they die because some say, well, they will die anyways because the ocean is heating up. The balance is this: nature can change and conform to changing conditions and develop new ways. And so we've been able, well, not we, But we're supporting these efforts because they've been able to convince a vast majority of people that there are also alternative ways to create energy, and the time is now to begin to build them. So that idea of restoration, protecting of species, and its relationship to the balance of the ecosystem of the natural world is something that's one big example, I think. And besides that, the person who's been leading that coalition has now been appointed to the Bureau, I think it's the Bureau of Land Management. So he's been working on this project for over 10 and a half years. Biden administration has such foresight to appoint him to the actual federal department that they've been negotiating with. So he will be heading up that department. We're going to see more of that kind of thing.
I would ask a question, Judith, and of course, this is the quintessential question you always get at these sorts of things, but I think really important. Um, and that is, do you have any suggestions for what people can do in their own communities outside of Indian country, non-Indigenous peoples as well, to support the work of the Native Organizers Alliance and your collaborators?
Well, number one, I think Miami University and Jacqueline especially has done some wonderful work within your community at the university of building authentic relationships with the Miami Tribal Center there and the Miami staff and students. And I'm really, I visited only once, but it really is such an amazing situation at the university, and you all should take full advantage of, working alongside and developing those relationships to have a deeper understanding of ways that you can be good relatives. Second thing is that if you come from an area where there are tribes, landowning tribes, you should reach out there as well. If in fact, uh, being at the university is you're not at the university, but you're living somewhere else, especially at this time of COVID, you should become aware and understand the history of the land that you're on and connect in an authentic way with the peoples who live on that land. How you can support us? Well, we are uh, about to launch this campaign called the Red Road to DC, a totem journey to protect sacred sites. And we are going to be going across country now that I have my vaccine, my 2 shots, and everybody else will too. Traditional carvers from the Lummi Nation approached me after the elections, understanding the big shift that was about to happen, and also understanding the momentum building behind Deb Haaland's nomination. And they wanted to carve a tree and bring this totem, traditional totem, to DC to remind the administration of their ancestral responsibilities to protect sacred sites, especially from the degradation that the fossil fuel industry has caused. And I said, I'm game, I'm game. And so we bought a tree. Who knew how expensive a tree is? It costs $6,000 for the kind of tree that's used for carving for a totem. And they are currently carving. And we will leave the Lummi territory up in Washington towards the end of May. And we will go to the Snake River Dam site and have traditional ceremonies there and invite one and all to come to understand better why this work on the Snake River Dam is important to them. And the Lummi tradition is that when people lay hands on the totem pole, it increases the spiritual power. And so this isn't of the totem pole. So we're going to go to many, many communities where people will lay their prayers and hands on the totem pole to drive home the political point that we need prior informed consent. We need the Biden administration to take urgent action. So we will go from Snake River to Bears Ears then to the Grand Canyon, which is being threatened by uranium mining. Then we would go to Chaco Canyon, the site of the biggest area of fracking. Then we would go to the Black Hills, where where the tribes there have been fighting since the beginning of time to have those hills returned to the hands of the Oshetee-Shikoan. Then we would go to the Missouri River, hosted by the Yankton tribe and Standing Rock Sioux tribe people, and all the people who worked on Dakota Access and KXL Pipeline will gather for ceremony there. And then we will go to DC and gift that totem to the Biden administration, and it will be on exhibit at the Indian Museum. So if you are in DC during the summer, you will be able to see that totem pole. So I would urge you to support that. We are going to have virtual visitations to the Arctic and Mauna Kea and other sacred sites that are threatened. We will have town hall meetings. We will have an interactive map and post daily on our long road trip report interviews of the people who are organizing in those areas. And we're doing it in conjunction with the Sierra Club, 350, the large green groups are supporting this journey. And then we would urge you to support legislation as it develops. There, Congressman Grijalva from Arizona is going to be reintroducing his bill called the Respect Act, which calls for prior informed consent when infrastructure projects are being proposed on treaty lands, not tribal lands, on treaty lands. So I think that watch our Facebook page. We are constantly posting new information about these kinds of campaigns, water and sacred sites and land, as well as health issues. And support in that way would be greatly appreciated. You know, we have a list of over 300,000 people who supported Standing Rock Reservation. So we email to that list information for them to take action on, and they understand in a very good way how to be a good relative and support some of the political initiatives that we take.
All right, Judith. And the last question that we have coming in terms of time will be, and Ash, I apologize in advance. I'm going to do my best with your name. Ash Awebil uh, asks, what role do you see the arts playing in terms of the movement for protecting land and water? And that can be arts in terms of those rooted in Indigenous knowledges, but also in terms of non-Indigenous approaches.
Culture and the arts are at the center. And that is why we're doing the Red Road to DC. We have to be effective in the 21st century in organizing it, no matter what community you're in, you have to effectively weave together an organizing strategy where you're really organizing people for power shifts, a cultural strategy so that people's spirits, hearts are uplifted, and a narrative strategy. Those three strategies have to be woven together. And if you do not have a cultural strategy, then you're leaving off a vast majority of potential allies and support, because people move not simply from their minds. They move with their hearts. They move with hope, because if facts could win the day, nobody would drive drunk or smoke cigarettes. So you can be right, but it's not enough. You need a cultural strategy with arts at the center, and you need a narrative strategy to tell the stories.
Okay. With that, I just want to extend a deep thank you to Judith LeBlanc. Thank you so much for this keynote. I love where that ended with Ash's question, and thinking about that weaves into also thinking about the role that we all have to play here. Thank you so much. And I got, Judith, from your keynote, this call to action. And thank you for providing that, because the goal of this conference is not only to educate our community on these issues, although consciousness raising is really important, but also to promote engagement in our own communities. Um, which is why tomorrow we'll be partnering with Three Valley Conservation Trust from 10 to 12 in the morning to do a cleanup at Rooter Preserve of the 4 Mile Creek that actually runs behind Western Campus here at Miami University. So take a look in your chat for that information. I have a long list of thank yous that I will try to keep as brief as possible, but they're all important. The Western Center for Social Impact and Innovation is thankful to all of the many people and organizations that helped to make this conference happen and that contributed their knowledge and expertise. So first and foremost, thank you for all of our wonderful speakers and panelists, and to Judith for sharing your knowledge and passion and providing, I think, a path forward as we all consider how we can get involved in our own backyards, so to speak, in the struggle to protect water and ensure equitable access. I want to thank the Western Program for Individualized Studies. Nick Money is the director, as well as the Western College Alumni Association and the Western Alumni Association of Miami University for their generous support of the conference. We want to thank our community partner tomorrow for the service project at 4 Mile Creek, the Three Valley Conservation Trust. I want to personally thank all of Western staff and student workers because without them, this event would not have happened, including our student worker, Carolyn Moore, for all of her support before in the 3 months leading up to this, as well as during our work today and sending out chats and communication to everybody. I want to extend a very special thanks to Western Center Coordinator Billy Sims, who really deserves so much credit for organizing this event. He's taken on so many behind the scenes roles, from webinar guru to PR manager to troubleshooter and more, in addition to Don Moeller, our IT guru. We're very grateful for both of your skill and expertise in the conference. And then finally, I want to thank all of the audience members who joined us today. For your willingness to join us today to add your own knowledge and wisdom through the questions that you asked, and through your continued commitment to promote and engage in creating water justice in your own communities and around the world. With that, we will close the conference. Thank you to everybody. Please visit our site if you'd like to email any of the presenters today. Have a great weekend and continue doing the work.